first saw this movie, probably around 2008-ish. Movie had been out on home video release long enough. I didn't have the inspiration. I wasn't inspired to go see the movie when it came out in theaters. I don't know why. Oh, I think what bothered me at the time was Nicolas Cage. That was part of my hesitation. I hadn't really appreciated a Nicolas Cage movie probably since maybe 10 years earlier, when he had that run of Face Off, The Rock, Con Air, those movies. Those were the last solid Nicolas Cage movies I had watched prior to this one that I had any remotely cared about. So something about Nicolas Cage turned me off, and so I'd never seen the movie. But and when I finally did see it, I had some problems. But I thought it was time to give it another watch and see if my feelings were the same. On that note, let's get into Ghost Rider. Let's unpack it. What's this movie about? A guy named Johnny Blaze, played by Nicolas Cage, who is a motorcycle daredevil, and he's one half of a team with his dad. His dad is sick. Johnny Blaze sells his soul to the devil in order to save his dad. But when the devil tricks Johnny Blaze, then Johnny Blaze has to assume a position of the latest in a long line of Ghost Riders, servants of the devil. So until his duty is fulfilled, he must remain a Ghost Rider. This movie was directed by Mark Steven Jackson, who also directed the Daredevil movie and also directed Elektra. That was new to me. I didn't really know that, but I knew about Daredevil because that was one movie that I liked. Actually, I did watch that movie fairly frequently. It was my favorite pre-MCU Marvel movie, but it definitely was a solid one that I unabashedly went to every now and again after a rough day at school or work. Sometimes I would just put on that movie. But he directed this movie as well. As you know, all right, stars, we got Nicolas Cage, you got Eva Mendes, the great Sam Elliott, Peter Fonda, a part of Hollywood royalty. It's got a pretty decent cast going on. But is it enough to get you to watch this movie? Well, that aside, forget that. Forget the cast. Let's talk a little bit about Ghost Rider, the character, for a second before we get into this movie. If you don't know, Ghost Rider is a Marvel Comics character. This was part of the pre-MCU Marvel slate. Marvel was releasing these movies fairly frequently, but nowhere near as frequently as the MCU as an entity had been doing up until recently. This is part of that grouping where you had the Spider-Man trilogy, you had Daredevil, Fantastic Four, both of those movies. You had the Punisher, also came out a couple years prior to this, Elektra. So he had a pretty solid, also to say nothing of Blade, which started this whole situation. Blade was a part of that group too. X-Men, there was a pretty good run. And remember, this movie came out in 2007, which is wild to think about now that how just a year later, roughly, you'd have Iron Man drop, which would open the door to the MCU. If you were a fan of these movies and you were a fan or you knew anything about Ghost Rider at all, you might be curious to watch this movie. And I think on the strength of the X-Men movies and the Spider-Man movies, that might be enough to get you to go to the theater during that time. It was not enough for me. I was aware of Ghost Rider. I had a couple comics issues, which I still have somewhere. I played sort of the separation anxiety Spider-Man game that had Ghost Rider as one of the Avengers coming in to help. When you got into trouble, you can call him, Captain America, Daredevil, or I think there was one other one. Oh, Hawkeye was the other one. So it's a pretty good situation. The '90s were a good time to be made aware of the Ghost Rider. And so again, I didn't see this movie when it came out, and when I finally did watch it, I was disappointed. I was outright angry. Like I felt like I wasted almost 2 hours of my time and my life that I wouldn't get back. I was hanging out with my brother, who at the time was a student at Berkeley. He had access. He was on the basketball team. This was his sort of last year at the school, and me and mom. I'm out of college, and I was just hanging out. I had some time. I was working, but I would go visit my brother at Berkeley. So we were in Berkeley one time, and I think our sister was with us. We spent some time in the locker room. They had a TV there in the room with some snacks and stuff back there. So we watched a couple movies, and one of those movies was Ghost Rider. And at the time, I thought the best thing about this movie was the casting of Eva Mendes and also the young woman who played the younger version of her character, Raquel Alessi. She was great. She was a great actor, but also she looked just like a younger Eva Mendes, and that was perfect. Everything else, everything felt like I wasn't with it. But having watched it again recently, I can say that my feelings have softened a little bit about this movie. I'm not quite as angry as I was. This was one of those movies where I for years thought it was a bad movie, and I thought it was frustrating to think about. Not to the extent of other movies that have also elicited pretty visceral responses from me emotionally. There aren't a lot of movies like that hit me like that. And the ones that do, or the ones that have, sometimes I'll go back and rewatch them just to see how it feels to me. This is one of those times. Today, I can say, look, this movie is not all that bad. I wouldn't say it was great, but it's okay. It's okay. It's as good as any other sort of mid-range superhero film of the time. And by that, I mean the movies that are not like the first two X-Men movies or the first two Spider-Man movies or even the first two Blade films, for instance. I think those are all pretty high quality superhero films in the Marvel, under the Marvel banner. It's not as good. I think Spider-Man 3 is better than this movie. There are a few movies. I think even Fantastic Four might be a little bit better than this movie too. That's just, again, this is my take. Now, though, I can appreciate Nicolas Cage's performance more. I actually think he did a pretty decent job given the script. And I appreciate that he was allowed to, they just let him go. They let him do Nicolas Cage stuff a little bit, like which is great. The unfortunate thing about that, though, is that Johnny Blaze as a character doesn't necessarily feel anything. He doesn't feel like a unique character. He feels like Nicolas Cage doing Nicolas Cage in a Marvel movie. Yeah, it's mostly Nicolas Cage who happens to be Ghost Rider in this movie. There's no Johnny Blaze. There's no Johnny Blaze. Who is that? Johnny Blaze is just like, that's fake. Nicolas Cage is the real situation here. They may as well have just called the character Nicolas Cage in this movie. That's what's happening. That's what I see. And I think there's something that's kind of cool about that. Yeah, I think Cage looks great in the movie. And I think if another actor was in this role, depending on what you are looking for when you come to a movie like this, you might have wanted something that felt distinct. If you read the comics, you might have wanted Johnny Blaze to feel like some version of that character from the text. I don't think you get that here. And so depending on who you are, that might be a problem. It certainly, it wasn't really an issue for me when I first watched it because I was just so upset by how the story was going that I didn't really care anything about what the acting actually was how the acting actually felt. This time though, I was able to catch that, and I actually I dig Nicolas Cage's performance. Again, I gotta mention Eva Mendes. I think Eva Mendes is great. I think Raquel Alessi is fantastic. The casting was fantastic between those two, playing the same character at different ages. The problem I have with Eva Mendes in this movie is how she was written. I think Roxanne as a character feels empty. To me, she doesn't really have any real depth. Not that she needs any depth, but I feel like she should have some presence. And I don't know that based on what's here in the movie that she feels like she has enough presence. You hear because you don't really know a lot about her. Which is a shame really, because Eva Mendes is fantastic as a performer, and she's not given enough meat to chew on. She feels like she's solely there as just the love interest. Everything she's doing is in the movie. Almost everything she's doing is around Johnny Blaze, trying to get him to connect with her, being upset when he can't. A lot of her motivations are around Johnny Blaze. There's nothing else around. Like we're told she's this ambitious, reporter. We see that, but it's not enough. We don't get enough. Like, to contrast that, you look at someone like Elektra Natchios from the Daredevil. She's obviously the love interest of Matt Murdock in that movie, but she has a whole other life that is solid, and she feels like she has a presence. She's an assassin, which we don't see that until it becomes apparent that she has some skill and she has some, but that's enough she has her own like agency, and she does her own things. And I think similarly to her, you have like Mary Jane in the Spider-Man movies. The Spider-Man movies are about Peter and his journey and stuff, but Mary Jane is an aspiring actor. She's out there auditioning. She's doing a bunch of things, and we see elements of Mary Jane actually pursuing her stuff. She has real things that are separate from Peter. And in Ghost Rider, Roxanne doesn't necessarily seem to really have that in the same way. She's there to support Johnny, and she gets bent out of shape when she can't really, when he's not giving her what she is asking for. And so that's unfortunate that she's written that way. But that's what bothered me about this viewing. I was able to really see that this time. I couldn't see it the first time I watched it. I mentioned Peter Fonda here. If you don't know Peter Fonda, if you don't know who Peter Fonda is, just look up the Fonda name. You know Jane Fonda. You might. If you don't, you should. Look up her name. Look her up. Look at where she comes from. Look at their father, Henry Fonda. It was a giant in old Hollywood time. And Peter Fonda comes from that pedigree, and he's good here. It's almost weird that he's in this movie. This is not the kind of movie that someone that I would have expected him to be in. But looking at him now, it's like, oh, he did a pretty good job as Mephisto. He's not around a lot to get a real sense of him, but maybe you don't need that much of him. I think you just know he's the devil. He's out there, and he's gonna be popping up. Rest assured, though, he does turn in a pretty solid performance. Next to him, Wes Bentley is Blackheart. He was very comic booky to me in this movie. Wes Bentley is a good actor. If you watch the Yellowstone show, Wes Bentley's in that show. He's terrific in that show. And here, I think he played Blackheart with a very comic book sensibility that, I suppose, for how the film was written, it works. This film doesn't feel like it's uber serious. It doesn't take itself too seriously because it has supernatural elements. Maybe that's part of it. But Wes Bentley is solid. I can't finish talking about the actors without talking about the great Sam Elliott, Mr. Western. Sam Elliott was one of my biggest. He's linked to one of my biggest issues about this movie, or what was one of my biggest issues about this movie. When I first saw the movie, Mark Steven Johnson had said this in the sort of director's commentary about how he saw this movie as a supernatural Western. which at the time bothered me. I didn't like the idea that there was like some cowboy stuff going on in this Ghost Rider story that was supposed to be urban in the city. He's supposed to be out there hitting people with the pendants there and stuff like that. Like, what's all this Western stuff? What is this? Stupid at the time. This time, though, it didn't bother me as much. And I think Sam Elliott was actually a huge reason for why it, when I really looked at it, Sam Elliott's great anyway. And so it was really a treat to see him here in this movie, to come back to this movie with fresh eyes, understanding the juice that Sam Elliott has. He is just like the epitome of like cool. He's like the gangster cowboy type sheriff, type dude. He's the caretaker in this movie, who has a probably the only one of the few solid backstories in this movie. His arc is pretty sound. So I think the movie would have been a lesser situation without Sam Elliott. And what's cool about it is Sam Elliott, it seems like it's the easiest thing. It doesn't seem like he's doing too much. He's putting just enough, finesse on stuff. And you could actually, if I'm being honest, you could look at another Western that Sam Elliott's in and you might not see that much of a difference. I think what gives it a little bit of edge is the fact that it has that supernatural angle. So I think now looking at this movie, the supernatural angle is quite welcome. It's just a shame that, again, he's not around a lot either. It's a shame that we don't really get to see too much of him. The visual effects of this movie are dated now, but the execution is pretty strong still. Like the transformations that happen in this movie, pretty cool. Particularly, they made sure that the Ghost Rider, no matter what else was happening, they made sure that Ghost Rider was looking correct in this movie. And not that he was just looking correct, that his motorcycle was looking correct. And how he transformed was engaging. And there's one particular transformation sequence where it's Nicolas Cage just going unhinged, which I feel like there has to be some rule in a good number of Nicolas Cage movies where he has to, it's in a contract somewhere, he has to be allowed to just go wild for at least one sequence, one scene. And he does that here, and it's actually pretty glorious to watch. So if you haven't seen it in a while, give it a look. The special effects are pretty cool, however dated they might seem. Here's the other thing I was thinking about with this movie, and this is really related to the idea of adaptations versus one-to-one translations. If I watched this movie as a kid, I would have been completely fine with Johnny Blaze's arc and how that ends and what he decides to do, what his choices are by the end of the movie. Watching it now, though, I would have been completely okay if he had made a different decision. And this speaks to the fact that it's an adaptation. I think it's okay for adaptations to veer from the source material in terms of plot things. Like, I don't think there has to be a hard and fast rule that things should happen exactly as it happens in the text, at the exact moment it has to happen in the text. I think, in fact, there are things that are okay to be changed. As long as it doesn't betray the spirit of the property. For instance, if Spider-Man in Spider-Man movies, if it was Spider-Man for all three movies and decided to give it up, like permanently, like for real, I would have been okay with that. To watch it now, I would be like, you know what? Yeah, let him live a real a normal life for a while, and then maybe he'll come back. Whatever. Like this, at some point he might come back. I think a good example, speaking of Spider-Man, is the change in Spider-Man 3. If you recall, one of the main plot points in that movie was that the person who killed Uncle Ben was actually not the person that we all thought the guy who it was in the first movie. Now, in the source material, that's not how it goes. The guy who kills Uncle Ben is the guy who kills Uncle Ben. That's it. But the movies changed that, and I was mad about that at first, because it's just like you're changing his whole reason for being Spider-Man. But after giving it some time. The point of that change, though, is to teach Peter a lesson about forgiveness. So I'm with that. I think there are other ways you could have done it, but okay, cool. And again, I know that that movie is an adaptation. It's not a one-to-one translation. It's not a direct. You can't do it. It's not exactly the same as, and it's not supposed to be. I think it. I don't think it. I don't think it has to be. I think it should be okay to change things like that. You know, if I wanted to read to get the original juice, the original story, then I'll read the original stuff. Similarly, Ghost Rider is a similar situation. When I watched it this time, I would have been okay if Johnny Blaze would have been like, you know what? I'm going to not do this anymore and go be with my girl, whatever it is, or do whatever it is like that. You figure it's been all this time, all these years that he's been away from her. They've been separated and stuff. And that, doesn't he deserve that time now? They deserve to be together. Because she was there before all that. She was there first. You know what I'm saying? Like, anyway. Now, again, if you're a kid, you want the hero to continue being the hero. Man, skip this girl. Go do your stuff, man. That's your job. Do your job. Like, that's what you want to do. Like, watching it now, I almost wish that the ending was a little bit different. But that aside, you know, it's a fun movie that I think, and partly why it's so fun is because Nicolas Cage is in it. I don't think it's great, but it's not as terrible as I once thought it was. And I think I needed to watch it again to see that. So that's all I have to say about that movie. If you haven't seen it and you are curious about it at all, watch it. In fact, I urge you to watch it just for Nicolas Cage. If you're a Nicolas Cage fan, watch this movie because you might have a good time. If you're an Eva Mendes fan, however, I'm sorry, you will be disappointed, or maybe you might not be. It'd be nicer to see her on screen. Maybe you want to see her on screen, whatever. But if you're a fan and you wanted something substantial, this is not a substantial role for Eva Mendes, unfortunately. But there's plenty of other things that you could probably latch onto that might be cool. As always, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.